Are you guys ready to get started again? All right. So we've had a fabulous day. I don't know about you. It was great that you guys were so flexible about lunch, especially after Sue Gardner told us in the morning that she wanted flexible people to work for her. So hopefully we're all hired. It's been an amazing day, and we've done so much, and we've already heard so many inspiring speakers, and I can see so much networking, so much energy is going on right now. And I'm really excited that we've got one more really whiz-bang, amazing speaker interview to come. So we've got Heidi Roizen as our final keynote, and she has been a mover and shaker in Silicon Valley for decades. You can read about everything she's done in your program booklet. But she's been an entrepreneur, she's been a VC, now she's at Draper, Jurvetson, and above all, she's known for networking. In fact, she's so well known for networking that the Harvard Business School wrote a case about her and networking. So I'm pretty sure there's something we can all learn from her today. She's also, if any of you have started to read Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In book, she's mentioned a couple times. And I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about that a little bit more. And so I'm really, really excited to have her here today. Interviewing her will be Kellie McElhaney, who's one of our favorite professors here at Haas. She's a Whitehead faculty fellow, and she founded the Center for Responsible Business, which just celebrated its 10th anniversary this year. So that's huge, yeah. And as I mentioned in my opening, she just created and taught the first woman in business class here at Haas as well. So, one more thing, you guys all have note cards. We're going to do that note card thing again. We're going to have people throughout the keynote, throughout the conversation. If you have questions, just pass them to the end, hold them up, and we'll pick them up and kind of get them sifted into the flow. So I'm really excited. Let's welcome Heidi and Kellie.
Thank you. I'm so amazed at so many people staying till the end, and you won't be disappointed, trust me, with Heidi.
Thank you.
I also wanted to recognize, I love when strong women bring their children with them. So where did your daughter go? Marlena, will you raise your hand?
She's back there.
Yay.
Marlena and Jack.
And Jack. I think it's just such a great example of work-life integration. We were talking about this earlier, but so Heidi, my first question to you is, how does it feel to be powerful, competent, and unliked?
Yeah, I know. It was so surprising to me. It's actually a funny thing. Kellie's, of course, referring to the case and the Heidi Howard study, where students were polled after reading the case, and they were given different genders in the case, and it turns out that Howard is much more likable than Heidi. So besides thinking about changing my name to Howard, I've thought about this, and I think one of the things about it is, if you've read the case, has anyone here ever taken my case as a class? Yeah, okay, so lots of you have done that. So one of the things is I come and teach the case occasionally, and when I do, afterwards students will come up to me and say, "You're so much nicer than you came across in the case." So it's interesting to me that, first of all, I think the cases are two-dimensional representations of three-dimensional people. So that's, the first thing about it. But I think the second thing is, when I think about now, why would Howard be more likable than Heidi? I thought, well, maybe it's because the case really is about me, and so maybe Howard just seems like a guy who's like so in touch with his feminine side or something. I don't know. Maybe that's just like really cooler about Howard or something. I don't know. It's weird.
But so that's a case study. Tell me about a real-world story in which maybe you, two things, wanted to be liked, and maybe wasn't, or just plain out wasn't liked and didn't care.
Yeah, well, I think you have to be at peace with both of those things happening, because you're not going to be liked everywhere you go. And I would argue if you're always just liked, you're probably not that effective. And again, it's a cliche, but I've heard a lot of people say, I'd rather be respected than liked. And I think a lot of times in work, it's easy to be liked by everybody. That doesn't mean you're going to be successful. You can be the nicest person. You can give everyone raises all the time. You can never fire anybody, and you'll be liked, but you may not be successful. So I think the first thing, and I think it's one of the reasons why, for me, the entrepreneurial path has been a path that I think has been I don't know that I want to call it gender blind, but I think there's an element of being an entrepreneur that's, your customer doesn't care if you're a woman, a man, a dachshund, they just care that if the product works, and, they don't really know who you are behind the product in many ways, where in a corporate environment, I think gender canon does play more of a role. So I'd say from an entrepreneurial perspective, I've certainly faced situations where it was clear that because I was a woman, somebody was uncomfortable with me, or I just didn't fit. I remember I was applying for a big loan for my company, the kind of $1 million plus loan, scary thing, and I went, the bank had a meeting where they had like all the people who were sort of in that same category, and they had a dinner, and I was the only woman in the room, and they were talking about football, they were talking about scotch, they were talking about golf, and I remember I was sitting there and I was thinking that Sesame Street song, one of these things is not like the other, and I was thinking, that is me, and I am not going to get this loan, and so, I faced, and again, I could give you guys story after story after story of moments like that where I knew, actually, I have to tell you this one other, because I've been dying to tell this story recently because of Cheryl's book and all this sort of stuff, and I was pitching a venture capitalist once when I was an entrepreneur trying to raise money, and one of his partners was walking, it was an office and it had a glass window here and it had a glass window to the outside, and so that partner was walking by and he could see the gentleman had his face to me and this face to the window, and he didn't realize that I could see his reflection in the window, right?
Oh no.
And he walked by 3 or 4 times, and I had to keep from laughing because he was doing, let's just say, rude sexual mimes. Like rude sexual mimes. I won't do them, but you can all just imagine them.
Come on, just do one. No,
you don't want to know. And I was trying to stick to my pitch, and the guy was obviously trying to not know that it was going on, and he of course didn't know that I knew, because I could see in the window that this guy kept walking by. So you have meetings like that, and you say, I'm not going to be successful in this particular meeting. But the good news about when you're an entrepreneur, there's always another bank, there's always another venture capitalist, there's always another somebody. Unlike when you're in a corporate environment and it's, if your boss is going to be that person, you're kind of stuck unless you go somewhere else. So I think you have to not care. I think you have to develop a thick skin and not really care. And I think the other thing is you have to diffuse. All right, one more story. I love this story. You also, though, I think there's a fine line between when someone is let's face it, if you operate in a largely male-dominated world, then things are going to happen where men might not even realize that they're making you uncomfortable, right? There's just there's words, and people swear, and and things like that, and that might make some people uncomfortable. And my feeling about that too is there are lines you cross that are inappropriate, but then there are just sort of people being people, and if guys are used to being in a room with only other guys, they're going to swear more, and maybe the first time they, say a swear word in front of you, you might get embarrassed or something, and that's just life, So I had this situation, it was during the dot-com bust, and I was part of this very big venture firm, and we had about $2 billion under management at the time, and the shit was just hitting the fan, right? I mean, everything was going wrong, and everything was awful, and our companies couldn't get follow-on financing, and so we went and we had this big offsite. So we're sitting around the room. So it's 11 people. I'm the only woman, and we had general counsel there, and we were going around the room deal by deal by deal, and we were talking about, I need some more money for this, I need some more money for that, and so finally one of my partners, he just slapped his hands on the table and he said, I got to tell you, I'm just so tired of what's going on right now. Every one of us is just walking, we're just sitting here at the table with our dicks in our hands, and we're just saying, I need $1 million for this, and I need $1 million for that. And he goes, you know what I see when I just look around the table? I just see a bunch of guys with their dicks in their hands. And general counsel is looking at me like, oh my God, this is like a lawsuit waiting to happen or something, whatever. And I just said, yeah, and this makes me really uncomfortable because I don't even have a dick to hold. not only did it break the ice, because I was a relatively new partner, but without skipping a beat, the guy who had started this whole thing, he said, well, if you ever need a dick to hold. And so I would just tell you that that's one of those moments where I could have spun that in a different way, and it could have been the most offensive thing that could have ever happened in a meeting. But instead, you can take it and say, you know, turn it around and you know, and we'll have some fun with it, and don't take yourself so seriously. But when I say this, I want to say that was a situation where it was a bunch of great people who were, I mean, they took me on as a female partner in the first place. That says that's a different level of progressiveness than a lot of other VCs. That doesn't mean that bad stuff also doesn't happen in other places. And so if you are in a situation where those things are happening, you have to be willing to stand up and you know, speak for your rights and move the ball forward for yourself and other people. And that's hard. And I know there are some cases in the press today about, particularly in venture capital, and I don't know anything about the insides of those cases, but I just think they're really difficult situations.
Yeah, it seems like venture capital has a big spotlight that's only going to get bigger right now with the Kleiner-Perkins case. Yeah. I love the response. Could I borrow yours?
Yeah. Don't mind anytime.
So we talk a lot at the business school at Haas. And by the way, I should tell you, she's not just a single GSB graduate. She's a double GSB graduate, undergrad and MBA from Stanford. So we're honored that she came up to Haas to...
Thank you for letting me come here. My brothers both went to Cal. My nephew went to the business school here. So thank you for allowing me on the campus. I appreciate it.
We appreciate it. We might try to adopt you. But at Haas, our Dean Lyons, talks a lot about path-bending leadership and says that we really, as a business school, exist to create path-bending leaders. Could you give one or two stories about how you either went off the path, bent the path, or led the path?
Yeah, boy. Well, the path is an interesting word because I also teach in the undergraduate, in the MS&E department at Stanford. And one of the things I tell my students a lot is, geez Louise, you guys, lighten up. Don't take yourself so seriously. There is no perfect path to anywhere. And if you really go look at successful people and you look at their career paths, you will find left-hand turns, U-turns, they will get fired, they will have all sorts of interesting things. And again, I'm a little bit biased because I tend to focus on entrepreneurs. But, you know, basically we have this program called the Entrepreneurial Thought Leader Series. It's etl.stanford.edu, and all the speeches are up and, you know, you can download and watch them, and it's open to the public and all that. And every one of those folks, you know, there isn't anyone who had a perfect career path. So to me, a career path is, you know, I don't know. I guess you could look backwards and sort of tie these things together, but I think that I know for me, my career has been driven by all sorts of things. It's been driven by opportunity, serendipity, passion. There certainly have been things I've done to prepare myself for things, and I think this is the balance, is to say, look, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. I don't know where I'm exactly going to go, but I know I need to have certain skills within the sort of spectrum of things that might be good fits for me, and therefore I'm going to go develop those skills regardless of where I ultimately end up. But I mean, for me, the path to, you know, my first job out of college, I got it because, well, I was an English major and creative writing, actually, and there just weren't a super lot of jobs for creative writing majors coming out of Stanford in 1980, and so I applied for a job at a computer company, at Tandem Computers, writing their company newsletter because that sounded like something a creative writing major could do, and there were 100 applicants for the job, but a friend of mine I'd gone to high school with was a secretary at the company and told me that the hiring manager used to work on Saturdays and gave me her direct phone number. I mean, this was pre-email, right? So I phoned on a Saturday, and I stood out because I phoned on a Saturday, and she had 100, because there were so many applicants, she didn't even want to deal with all the resumes. So I ended up talking her into letting me have the job. So that was sort of a random thing. Then I got there, and all of a sudden I was in a computer company, you know, in kind of the lowest of the low position, but I had a lot of access to the senior executives because I was writing the newsletter. And what I realized is everybody getting ahead had an MBA or an engineering degree, and it was too late for me to be an engineer, but I thought, well, I can go be an MBA. And so I applied to the Stanford Business School on the diversity ticket and got in for some strange reason. And so things like that happen, right? Then I went to business school, and frankly, I interviewed at the Career Placement Center, and nobody wanted me because I didn't have that engineering degree, right? So I went and there was I had one interview where the guy said, "I am so happy to see you." And I thought, thank God, finally someone who really wants to interview me. And he said, "You're the first person who's walked in here not wearing a proper suit." And I thought, oh, great. Now I stand out because I didn't dress properly I never got a single job offer. And so, but meanwhile, I had this brilliant, Cal graduate brother who wrote this great software program, and he couldn't really sell his way out of a paper bag, but he's a brilliant programmer. And so I remember he said to me, "Well, I'll hire you in spite of the fact that you have a Stanford MBA." And so so he and I went into business together, and in fact, here's another lean or bend or do something. I talked him into letting me be the CEO. Right? So, tells you who's got the more persuasive selling skills, doesn't it? But I talked him into it, and it was interestingly because a friend of mine that I had worked with at Tandem, who had been head of corporate communications, said, "Well, if you really want to stand out, you should be the CEO, because there are no women CEOs in the Valley," right? And also because when people want to do business, they want to speak to the CEO. Well, your brother's hiring you because he doesn't want to talk to anybody. But everybody always wants to talk to the CEO. So I told my brother that. I said, "Peter, you know what? I should be the CEO for the following 2 reasons," and they were highly logical reasons, and so I became the CEO. So I think,
And we talked about this earlier, but the job description for CEO, if you had seen that job description, would you have applied?
Well, no, because and again no. So there's a funny answer to this and a serious answer. I mean, the serious thing, and Cheryl talks about this in her book, and I see this all the time. I read a lot of resumes. I serve on a lot of boards, so I field a lot of candidates. Women will only apply for a job if they're sort of 100% qualified, where men will tend to apply for jobs if they're more, shall we say, aspirationally qualified, right? And so, but, and we laugh about that, but the reality is, and I'm also newly single, so I joke about this. Is like, if you go on Match.com and you say like what you're looking for, well, sure, don't we all want? I won't give you the list, but everyone can imagine that list. It's we may as well have the whole list, right? What the hell? And so if you're writing a job description, you may as well write someone who's had this much career experience and an MBA and I don't know, an Olympic medal or whatever, because why not ask for everything? But the reality is most people don't 100% qualify, and so. If men are more comfortable applying for jobs where they're not 100% qualified, and women only apply for the ones they're 100% qualified for, well, inevitably you're going to have more men getting those kind of stretch jobs where you really want to go. I was very fortunate, and again, this is another thing that I get asked, like, what would you go back and do differently in your career? And my answer is sort of, well, I can't answer that, nothing, because everything that happened, even things like getting fired and having bad experiences, got me to a place where I'm really happy with my career. So the CEO thing, I wasn't qualified to be a CEO. Why? Was I? I was not, but my brother didn't know that. No, seriously, who knew what you were supposed to do to be the CEO of a software company? There were no software companies, so why couldn't I be a CEO? And the answer, the thing is, I may have been qualified to be a CEO because I obviously got it started and we were going, but nobody funded us. And so you would say, well, gosh, aren't you disappointed you didn't get funding? Well, the funny thing is, a number of my friends who got funding also then subsequently got fired, because you got funding and all of a sudden you have millions of dollars, which means you could hire someone who's better than you are, and your venture capitalists say, well, you're not really very good, let's go hire someone else, and so you get fired. So in a way, the fact that we didn't raise money was a blessing for me career-wise, because it allowed me to kind of learn on the job. So eventually I think I got reasonably qualified to actually do it. So worked out.
So I'm going to start opening up to audience questions, so make sure you're passing your questions to the women that are walking around. you were called the master or mistress of networking. And I think that a lot of people still think, and particularly women, still think of networking as a bad word. Can you talk about your approach?
Yeah, I kind of think of networking as a bad word too, because it sort of implies this kind of, it's like a contest where I'm going to go out and collect as many business cards as I can, or you don't ever want to come home and say, boy, I sure networked today. You know, this is kind of a crazy idea, but the approach that I've had, and by the way, this is also one of those interesting things. I am now sort of considered an expert in networking. I'm considered an expert in networking because there was a case written about me. The case was not written about me because I was an expert in networking so much as the Harvard professor who wanted to write the case about networking wanted a female protagonist because there weren't enough females in Harvard cases, and it just happened that same week there was an article about me in USA Today about how I was the supreme networker of Silicon Valley. The article was written because the guy who was the USA Today technology reporter, he always used me as a source, and one of the things you learn when you run a small company is always be a good source to important people in the press, because eventually someday they'll have a slow news day and they'll write about you, and that's exactly what happened. And so again, what I'm just trying to explain is the serendipity of how I am now known as an expert about networking. I did not set out to do it. It was this series of somewhat sort of random events. And then the funny thing is, once the case was written, and the case actually became very popular and gets taught a lot, and people ask me to talk about it all the time, well, I had to learn a lot about networking so I could talk about the case. So it all just kind of, circles back around. But all that said, I believe we're all going to have to reinvent ourselves multiple times, because the world is changing really rapidly, and no matter what skill set you learn today, it will be obsolete 10 years from now. And I think, if you look at my career, I'm 55 now. I've reinvented myself a couple times. And you do that because you have to. You do that because the world changes. You do that because your goals change and what you want to do in your life. You might, there are years that you're willing to get on airplanes and go places all the time. There are years you're willing to work really hard. There's years you might not want to do that. What you define as interesting and happiness and all that might change over time. And so you're going to reinvent yourself multiple times. And my belief is when you go about doing that, you will do a much better job if you have collected people who have some diversity, but who share your ethics, your enthusiasm, your whatever it is draws you to those people and draws those people to you, that powerful group of people, and the group is changing all the time, will help you redefine what you're going to do, and you will help them. And if you don't have those people, it's just a lot harder to do. And so my belief is, I look at my whole life as an opportunity to go collect interesting people. And when I say collect, it doesn't mean like I don't have a scrapbook where they're all the business cards, but I meet people, I get to know them. I think it's very difficult to sort of network and get to know people if you don't have a common thing to work on. So I've certainly found that not only in my work situation, but in some volunteerism, trade associations. I'm a huge believer in going and involving yourself in the trade association in the industry that you're in terms of building a network. I think that you can find networks in amazing places. And I would say it also isn't about always looking up. One of the things that I do now is I teach undergrads at Stanford, and somebody said to me once, "Why on earth would you go do that?" Like that's a lot of work, and they're all just so young and inexperienced. And I say, well, as does Cal, I say, hey, you know what? Stanford does a pretty good job of pulling a bunch of interesting people into a place, and by the time those people are on campus and select entrepreneurship and select my class, they're interesting to me. And so even though they're much younger than I am, they have a lot to offer me that I don't have, right? They have a new way of looking at the world. They are facile with technologies that are not to me. They live in a different way. They are my guinea pig lab for anything that I want to say with authority in one of my boards. Like I'll say, well, do you want to know what college students are doing today? Well, I asked 50 of them yesterday, and Nobody's emailing anymore. They're all texting, or now they're all, something else. I mean, I get a great benefit out of being with those students. And so I think that the thing that I would say is wherever you are in the spectrum of the relationship building with another person, there's always something you can give. I mean, there really is. And there's always some basis around which I think you can build something. So to me, that's really the essence of networking. To me is just, can I get to know other people, and are those other people going to be fellow travelers with me on this journey, and are we going to be able to help each other out? And it doesn't always work. Sometimes you can't help each other out, but more often than not, I think you can.
So this is an interesting, I'm going to go to audience questions, and I like this. Talking about networking, it's really about relationships, right? Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes, and I think we're seeing this with Sheryl Sandberg's book and the vitriol that's being slung at her, and correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen any of it coming from men. I've only seen it coming from women.
Right.
So the question is, with Queen Bee syndrome, it's often said that women feel more stress working with or under other women than male managers. Do you think so? Do you have any experience?
Well, so I have a theory on this. I think generally women are, and I'm going to stereotype a little bit. I think we actually like to help people. We're sort of wired that way. And I think that when you're in a situation where it's not a zero-sum game, and that's why I think, again, entrepreneurship is really interesting, and I think that's why you see in the Valley so many women who are really willing to go out of their way to help each other and all of that, is because they don't perceive the pie as finite. I think the problem is there are a lot of high-profile places, and I'll tell you, I think investment banking and management consulting are two of the prime, bad boys in what I'm about to say. It's a zero-sum game. They have so many slots, they'll put in so many women, and you can claw each other to get to the one that's going to happen or whatever. And they are, again, I don't hate all management consultants and investment bankers, and some of them are my best friends. But I would generally say that I've had a number of students call me after a year of being in one of those places saying, "Oh my God, this is awful, and it's relatively sexist, and so I feel like I have that much more against me. And if there's one other woman in there, if the two of you have been pitted against each other for one position, you're not going to build a collaborative environment." And so I just think that it's highly dependent on the position, and it's highly dependent on the individual.
You talked about being in difficult situations and needing to stand up for yourself. Do you have a story of how you've done that effectively, either for yourself or for others? How does one stand up for oneself in a way that's effective?
Well, I think you do, first of all, ethically speaking, about ethics is you should always stand up for yourself. I think if you're ever in a situation, and I've faced this a couple times, where you're in a work situation and you're asked to do something that makes you uncomfortable, and again, the business books are filled with the crimes of the past and things, that WorldCom and Enron and things that happen, and I think in many of those cases there was someone who started to feel like this isn't right. And boy, is it hard to say this isn't right, or to leave, or to do something. But in those situations I've been fortunate to never be directly in one of those situations, but I've seen some pretty close up, and if you don't pull the plug now on those things, it'll hurt you a lot more in the future. So you got to stand up for those things, even if it's really hard. I think the other thing, though, and again, Sheryl mentions this in her book, and I highly recommend you all read the book. I think it's just a great book, and I think it's the way it's being received versus the reality of what's actually in the book is just remarkable to me. But talking about how women are perceived in terms of being out for themselves versus how you can take it to a more global level, or how you can take it to a more abstract level. And so I think that's another, again, a skill, and it's something she talks about in the book, and it's something that I've used is I'll give you an example, women are very bad at negotiating for their own salaries, right? We don't like to ask someone to give us a raise, and men are actually better at that. Why? I don't know, but we should all get better at that, because if we don't ask, we're not going to be given. And this is, a little thing I like to say, but it's Shirley MacLaine said this first. It's called the 20-40-60 rule. At 20, you're constantly worried about what other people are thinking about you. At 40, you decide, I don't give a damn what other people think about me. And at 60, you realize no one was actually thinking about you. And so I love that, and I think about that all the time, because the thing you have to remember is nobody actually is thinking about you. There isn't anyone else who wakes up every morning and says, I wonder if Heidi Roizen is being paid enough money, or I wonder if she's really happy in her job, or I wonder if whatever, I mean, even probably those of you who still have parents alive, your parents probably don't even do that much. So the point is, you have to learn to ask for yourself. But I think sometimes what you need to do, if you want to get comfortable about that, is be data-driven. Understand what the data is. I had a situation recently where I wanted to join a board and they wanted to have me, but the board compensation wasn't at the level that I was willing to take. And the funny thing about board compensation is they pay everybody the same, right? But it just wasn't enough money to do it. And I had to go to them and say, you need to pay more, and here's why. And so what I did is I actually explained to them, they said, well, it's a great honor to serve on our board. And I said, I agree, it is a great honor. It is also my profession. And when I serve on your board, the opportunity cost for me is I'm not going to serve on another board. And here's the Spencer Stuart Board Index of what the average board comp is. And here's the other company whose board I'm on that pays me 4 times what you're saying you're going to pay me. And so you must understand my predicament, right? My predicament is I would love to serve on your board, but we have to try to bridge this gap. And they were great about it. And they went back and they did that. And part of the situation was understanding a little bit, it's a different country and it's a different culture and all of that. But I think the good thing is I didn't make it personal. It wasn't really about me. And I brought them data that they could turn around and get comfort with, that I wasn't just being a jerk, that this was actually sort of market information. And if they were trying to move their company into something that was going to look more like Silicon Valley companies, then they were going to have to understand the pay matrix, for example. So I think those are the kinds of things that one needs to do. But I think you got to get over it and you got to ask, right? And that's just, again, we're uncomfortable with that.
I heard some really good advice from the chief talent officer at Deloitte. She said, never thank somebody for giving you a raise. Tell them they got a bargain. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was just so brilliant. 2 more questions. What do you think makes somebody good at sales? And why do you think women are so often afraid of sales? And it's a lot like negotiation.
Yeah. Well, I tell my students this all the time. They say, what jobs should we go, what should we go do to be ready for anything? And I say everyone should have to spend some of their time selling something. Because when you actually have to make a sale, boy, do you learn a lot. And the other thing is, I think everyone should manage a P&L. Everyone should actually have to turn a profit doing something, which is different, right? But they are somewhat related. So, I think sales is so much about understanding the benefit of what it is that you have. And I'll abstract it up one level. Sales to me is a negotiation. And everything in life is a negotiation, I believe. When I was first dating my unfortunately now ex-husband, he one time he said to me, "Everything with you is a negotiation," and I said, "Thank you." I thought he was complimenting me. It turned out he wasn't. But my opinion about negotiation is so. Again, if you believe it's a finite pie and it's I win, you lose, like a used car transaction or something, then negotiation's a bad thing. But most things in life, when you're negotiating, it's actually different. It is, and I'll use a line, the one sentence I remember from my entire 2 years as a business school student is, negotiation is the process of finding the maximal intersection of mutual need. So I love that. I'm going to say it's the process of finding the maximal intersection of mutual need. So the idea is you have things you want and I have things I want. Let's sit down together and figure out how to maximize our ability to both get what we want. And what I love about defining negotiation that way, and it relates to sales as well, obviously, because sales is selling is negotiating, is I might have ways to get you more of what you want than you even know to ask me for. But if you don't know what to ask me for, then if you don't frame it in such a way that I can use my creativity to help you solve your problem, then we're not going to get a better solution out. So to me, this idea of really saying, let me understand your needs. Why are you asking for that? What is it? What problem are you trying to solve? As opposed to saying, I want, I have an example of this, but it's a handbag example. I'm sorry to use a handbag example because I'm trying to be very non-gender, whatever. But if you go to a store and you think you need a tan handbag, and there are no tan handbags, you won't get a tan handbag. If you go to the store and you say, well, there are none being shown, but let me ask the sales clerk, and she says, well, I don't have it here at this store, but I can order it in from another store, that's one more level of helping you in a way that you couldn't have solved your problem on your own. But if you actually walk in with the dress you're trying to match and you say, this is the dress I want to wear, what handbag would go with this? The sales clerk, who's in fashion and presumably knows this stuff better than certainly better than I do, might say, well, here's a teal handbag, and that would actually look killer with this dress. And you might hold it up and go, well, wow, I never would have thought of a teal handbag. So I'm sorry to use a shopping example, but I have to come up with a better example for this. But the idea is really, if you can do this, maximal intersection of mutual need, I think you end up with better solutions. And that to me is an incredible skill, and an incredible also when you get stuck in a negotiation, it's really important to back up and say, why are we stuck? What is the need? What is it that I'm not hearing you say to help me solve this problem for both of us? Because sometimes you start pushing and pushing and pushing, and it's so important to win the point. And like I said, I won't ask for a show of hands, but for anyone who's gone through a divorce, which is probably the most difficult negotiation you ever go through, but sometimes people get hung up on, they'll fight to the death over the set of china that you could actually just go to Macy's and buy another set. But I don't know why, people fight over the wrong things instead of backing up and saying, what is really important to me? What is something that is really important to me in this divorce? And what is the other thing, which is after I divorce this person, we're still going to be family, and we're still going to have children together, and we're still all this other stuff. So I better not, blow up all the bridges here unless something's really important to me. And if I can get the other person to understand why it's important to me, because even in a divorce, not everything is win-lose, right? And yeah, I guess we could go on and on. I could go on and on forever about divorce negotiation. We won't do that. But the point is, even in a divorce, I think that sometimes you have to step back and back up and say, what's important to me? What's important to the other person? And what is important to us in the long run? And sometimes you'd be amazed that problems ultimately get solved in a better way than if you yourself, if you write down what you think you want, and then you get to the end of a negotiation, hopefully if you've done it well, the result is actually going to be better than what you thought you were going to get.
Here's a great question from Avery, who's 9 years old. Where's Avery? She wants to know, how do you get better at your job?
Oh, how do you get better at your job? Well, you try to learn something every day, and you try to push yourself to do something. Is it Eleanor Roosevelt who said every day do something that scares you?
You're afraid of it.
Love that. I think that, for example, I used to be really afraid to talk in front of people. And my first conference that I was ever, when you're CEO, even if you're a CEO of a little tiny company that nobody's ever heard of, your goal of being that CEO is get on a panel and go talk, because then people hear about your company and they might buy your product. And I was so scared at the first panel I did. I was shaking. I mean, I was just shaking. I was petrified. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to be a CEO, I better learn how to speak. And so I started taking more opportunities, and I started volunteering to go speak in class, and I started doing things, because I feel if you want to get better at something, throw yourself at it and do it. One other thing I'll tell you about how to get better at your job too is to understand what you're not good at. And sometimes you need to go learn what you're not good at, right? So the example of public speaking, I had to go learn how to do that. Spreadsheets, okay, I don't love building spreadsheets. I can look at them, I can read them, I can get through an income statement and balance sheet, I can do all that stuff, but I don't really love building models. And it turned out that in venture capital, building models was kind of important. And I decided one day, I was being pushed by my partners, and I had an associate who worked for me, and I said, I always hire the most kick-ass model builder associate that I can, because here's something that I've learned about myself. I could work till I'm blue in the face, and I'm only going to, at best ever, be a C+ modeler, right? I'm just not very good. I don't mean C+, the programming language. I mean the grade. I'm going to be a crappy modeler because I just don't like doing it. And so I'm going to figure out a way to hire someone else to do the stuff that I don't like to do, because no matter how much I do it, I'm never going to be good at that. And I think that that's something, again, for all of us in our lives as you go through your work life and your life, right? And we were talking about this earlier about happiness and about being happy. To me, if I do things I enjoy and I do things where I'm building muscle, it doesn't mean that I'm not sometimes scared to go do new things. But if I'm doing things and I'm in, there's a book out called Flow, you know, that feeling of flow, right? That feeling of like you look up and you suddenly go, my God, it's midnight. I didn't even realize that, you know, I've been working on this for 5 hours because I'm so into what I'm doing. I mean, I love that feeling. I love to get that feeling. If you have the opposite, I don't know if any of you had a job. I once had a job. I was the secretary at Great America. This was between high school and college. I was the secretary for the merchandising department from like 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. every day. And there was a clock on the wall, and the second hand squeaked between seconds 55 and a minute every single minute, right? And I mean, I remember sometimes how long it took for that squeak to come back again. I'm thinking, that was 1 minute? Are you kidding me? And so that is the opposite of flow, right? So my feeling is you should try to find those circumstances where you get more and more into it. But the interesting thing when you read about flow and you study flow is sometimes when you are in flow is actually when you are being challenged and when you're learning something new. And so flow isn't always about knowing how to be good at something and being good at it. It's actually sometimes doing something difficult.
So Avery, go to school on Monday and do something you're really afraid to do.
Yes.
Tell them Heidi told you to do that. So we're out of time, but two last questions that are related. Of what are you most proud? And if you could go back and do one thing differently, what would you do differently? More of, less of?
Well, I'm most proud of my kids. Aww, they're really sweet. They're really great. But I guess I would also say I'm also proud. Proud's the wrong word. I am grateful that I have been able to build a career that allows me to be authentic to who I am. And I see a lot of people who go, and men and women, who go be something super successful and have the title and have the money and have the jets or whatever, and they're just miserable. And I'm sad for those people, and I feel really grateful that I kind of get up every day and I have a nice life and I enjoy my work, and when I don't like doing something, I can stop doing it, I can wind it down and go find something else to do, and that people actually pay me. Don't tell them I said this, but you know, they pay me for stuff I probably would go do for free anyway. But it's nice to get paid. So I feel really grateful about that, and so I don't know that I would do anything differently. I think the thing that I am continuing, it's always a challenge to do what you authentically want to do, as opposed to doing what other people want you to do or what you think you should do, or the title, or you know, it's a challenge to sort of just say no and to allow yourself to drive towards things that you want to do. And again, it's one of those weird things that, I don't know if women do this more than men, but I do it. Like, I don't actually have a regular full-time job, right? I still feel guilty if I read a novel on a weekday during work hours. Why? Like, is someone gonna be mad at me because I'm doing that? But I still, you know, I have these, so I think we all operate under these sort of what everyone's expectations are and what we should do, and I think that for me, the biggest thing is to try to continue to allow myself to do what makes me happy. So.
Thank you. I read People magazine today. You just alleviated.
Oh, okay, good. It's a Saturday though. When you can read it on a Monday at 2, I'm going to be really proud of you.
I'm going to try it. Well, we are out of time, but I'm so impressed with Heidi. We're friends, so I've already known what a great woman she is. But the stories, and I think the lessons that we take away from all that she's been through and all that she has led in are so high impact. So thank you, even though you went to Stanford.
Thank you for having me here.
Really appreciate it.